From Sterling Price's balcony in Bel Air, Los Angeles looked like a circuit board left humming beneath a sheet of midnight glass. The 405 was a silver vein. The towers downtown were quartz teeth, and beyond them the dark lip of the Pacific waited like a final answer. His infinity pool pressed the sky back toward the city, a perfect blue blade he never touched after sunset. He preferred distance. He'd made a fortune from it. At 55, Sterling had a face the town recognized even if it didn't love. Handsome in a boardroom way, salt at the temples, a smile trained to end conversations. He owned a streaming platform that had swallowed 3 studios and spit out a dozen awards. A condo stack in downtown where influencers paid obscene rents for a skyline they almost never looked at, and a minority slice of the Lakers that got him better seats than friends. The math said billionaire. The mirror said tired. He checked his phone again. No message from Mia. The last text was 2 days old. Pilates, then lunch at the Bay Club. Don't wait up. She was 32, sharp as a bottle's edge, and had taught him the algorithm of the city's new attention economy. He had taught her that attention could be bought wholesale. Somewhere between those lessons they'd mistaken velocity for love. He went back inside. The house was a museum of warm light and curated emptiness. Travertine floors, an Eames chair nobody sat in, framed one sheets of films he'd financed and barely watched. The kitchen's marble island held a bowl of citrus the chef rotated daily like a sacrament. Sterling poured bourbon to the first ridge on the glass and took it the way his father had taught him. No ice, no flinching. The news murmured from a wall panel above the fireplace. All anchors and wildfires and a mayoral scandal involving a city commission and a fundraiser in Hancock Park. Sterling muted it. He didn't fear scandals. He feared silence. In this town, silence meant you'd finally run out of doors to knock on. A notification blinked. Security, Gate 1. He tapped it. The camera framed Leo Danner, sunglasses at night, hands lifted in theatrical innocence. Sterling sighed and buzzed him in. Leo arrived like a private storm. Linen jacket, sneakers too white for gravity, a grin that could sell a verdict. He'd produced 2 hits in a row and believed the third would crown him. You look like a man who's been left on read, he said, opening the fridge uninvited and stealing a sparkling water. She's in Malibu, Sterling said, pretending it wasn't a guess. Or Santa Barbara, wherever people learn to forget. People remember money, Leo said. That's the only math that scales. Come out. There's a listening party in Laurel Canyon. New rapper, real heat. Everyone's going. I'm not everyone, Sterling said. That's the point. Leo leaned on the island. You stay up here, you'll start hearing the house talk back. And it never says anything nice. Sterling almost smiled. The bourbon made a soft animal in his chest. He looked past Leo to the glass, to the pool, to the city he'd been extracting gold from since dial-up. He remembered the first check he'd written on a film that shouldn't have worked and did, the way executives had shaken his hand like something holy had passed between them. He remembered being hungry. The hunger felt cleaner than the ownership that came after. Fine, he said. 1 hour. Leo's eyes sparkled with the victory of small triumphs. Bring the car that makes them ask for selfies. They took the matte black coupe down Roscoe Maury, the engine a restrained snarl, the city rising to meet them. Billboards flamed along Sunset. Faces he'd paid too much for, smiles engineered in post. Past the chateau, past the strip clubs that survived every recession, past the street preachers who knew the exact volume that guilt required. Laurel Canyon opened like a throat, dark and coiled, and the temperature dropped as if secrets were colder than air. At the gate of a cedar-clad house that smelled like eucalyptus and old lyrics, a girl with glitter on her collarbone checked names and pretended not to recognize him. Inside, music bloomed, sub-bass and prophecy. People were dancing in the way Angelinos dance, like being seen was the choreography. Tinctures on a tray, champagne pyramids, a mural of Bowie winking down like a patron saint. Sterling let the room wrap him. He said the correct hellos. He promised an introduction to a showrunner he barely tolerated. He watched Mia's absence move through the party like a draft under a door. It found him again by the bar, where a man with a canyon tan and a pocket square like a sail introduced himself as Colt Reeves, developer, visionary, friend of friends. Colt's handshake had the pressure of someone used to confirming realities. Mr. Price, Colt said. I'm told you like wins. Who doesn't? Sterling replied. Colt's smile did not reach his eyes. There's a private table in Benedict Canyon tomorrow night. No press. No tourists. A little risk, a lot of reward. Might distract you from whatever you're not texting back. Sterling felt the old hunger stretch awake, slow and feline. He didn't gamble, he told himself. He placed capital. He picked outcomes. He had always been the house. Text me the address, he said. Outside. Later, the city waited like a promise he kept breaking. The car purred. The knight pressed a fingertip to his throat and counted. The sun had barely slid into the Pacific when Sterling found himself cruising down Sunset Boulevard in the matte black coupe. The boulevard was alive the way only L.A. could be. Palm trees cut like black paper against a tangerine sky, neon signs flickering to life, billboards taller than dreams. Leo sat in the passenger seat, one ankle resting on his knee, texting furiously between sips of cold brew. We'll start at the Viper Room, he said, but don't get comfortable. Tonight's about movement. Momentum keeps you relevant. Sterling smirked. Since when are you my PR consultant? Since you started looking like a widower in your own life. The Viper Room's valet line was a parade of absurdity, Rolls-Royces idling behind Teslas, a Lamborghini with gull-wing doors stuck halfway open like it had stage fright. Inside, the air was a mix of perfume, tequila, and ambition. A DJ pumped out beats that felt engineered for Instagram stories, while clusters of actors, influencers, and people of questionable profession posed under violet light. Leo worked the room like a campaign manager. Every handshake was a connection. Every laugh was a soft transaction. Sterling followed, collecting nods from people who recognized his face but couldn't name a single one of his companies. Fame by osmosis was a strange currency, but in Los Angeles, it still bought you drinks. It didn't take long before a tall man in a silk bomber jacket approached Sterling. Big fan of your work, he said, without specifying what that was. There's a private bar upstairs. Quieter. Better people. They climbed a narrow staircase, the bass fading into a low throb. The upstairs lounge was dim, with leather booths and an unspoken exclusivity. Here, the conversations were slower, the smiles more calculated. A server brought them champagne without asking. Leo leaned in. Poker game in 20 minutes. High stakes. I vouch for you. Sterling raised an eyebrow. You know I don't. Gamble, Leo finished for him. Yeah. But you invest, right? Consider this an investment in a story you'll tell later. The private room wasn't much bigger than Sterling's wine cellar. 5 men sat around a round table. A retired NBA player in a velvet blazer, a crypto millionaire who looked about 25, a property developer in an expensive tan, and 2 strangers with eyes like still water. The buy-in was $1 million. Sterling didn't hesitate. A quick wire transfer, and a pile of chips appeared in front of him like a dare. At first, the cards were kind. A flush here, a full house there. He was up $800,000 within the first hour, the champagne suddenly tasting sweeter. Leo grinned from the sidelines, giving him that I told you so look. But then came the turn. A bluff got called. A perfect hand got beaten by an impossible one. In less than 20 minutes, Sterling was down $2. $3 million. The property developer, Colt Reeves, the same man from the party in Laurel Canyon, leaned back in his chair and studied him. You've got instincts, Colt said. But you're playing the wrong table. Sterling gave him a dry smile. Enlighten me. There's a game tomorrow night, Colt said. Benedict Canyon. Real money. Real players. Better odds. Sterling didn't ask what real meant. He already knew he'd be there. The Benedict Canyon mansion didn't appear on any map. The address Colt Reeves texted led Sterling to a narrow road that wound upward, each turn revealing bigger, meaner houses than the last. At the crest, a black steel gate slid open without him even announcing himself. Someone had been watching for him. The driveway curved past manicured gardens and a water feature that probably cost more than a small apartment building. At the entrance, 2 men in tailored black suits greeted him. No names, no smiles. Inside, the place was an art gallery masquerading as a home. Abstract canvases worth 7 figures hung beside mid-century furniture no one sat on. The poker room was upstairs, at the end of a hallway lined with glass cases of rare whiskey. Sterling counted 8 people at the table. The retired NBA player from the Viper Room, Two crypto millionaires, a Russian man with an accent as sharp as a razor, a woman in a crimson dress whose eyes never left the cards, Colt Reeves, and two others Sterling didn't recognize but immediately pegged as sharks. The buy-in tonight wasn't $1 million. It was $5 million. Sterling didn't flinch. The wire cleared in seconds. The first hand was almost theatrical. Sterling picked up pocket kings. He raised aggressively, chasing out all but Colt and the woman in crimson. The flop came, king, 9-9. Full house. He played it cool, slow betting, letting them nibble. On the river, Colt pushed all in. The woman folded. Sterling called without hesitation. Colt turned over a pair of nines. For of a kind. The room didn't laugh, didn't gasp, just the quiet rustle of chips moving away from Sterling. Hell of a start, Colt said, smirking as he stacked the chips. The next few hands bled him slowly. A straight beaten by a flush beaten by a full house. Every time, he thought the tide would turn. Every time, it didn't. Hours passed. The bourbon flowed freely. The air in the room was thick, not from smoke, but from the weight of money moving invisibly between the players. By midnight, Sterling was down $11 million. That's when Colt leaned toward him, voice low, almost friendly. You can buy back in. Double. I'll cover it until morning. I like a man who hates to lose. Sterling's pulse kicked. Logic whispered to walk away. Pride shouted louder. Send me the paperwork, he said. Colt's grin was all teeth. No paperwork here, my friend. Just a handshake. Sterling extended his hand. It was warm, damp, not from nerves, but from knowing he'd just agreed to something he couldn't take back. The game ended at 3:17 a.m. Sterling walked out $23 million lighter, the cold pre-dawn air in Benedict Canyon cutting through the bourbon haze. Colt walked him to the door like an old friend, palm resting casually on Sterling's shoulder, the kind of touch that felt less like comfort and more like a quiet claim. You played well, Colt said. But this table isn't about cards, it's about leverage. Sterling tried to smile, though his jaw felt wired shut. And tonight, leverage belonged to you. For now, Colt agreed. But I like you, Price. You're not one of those tech boys who think they invented risk. You understand the game. Sterling opened the coup's door, but Colt wasn't done. I've got something bigger than poker, Colt said. A land deal in East Hollywood. Off-market. City's about to greenlight rezoning, and when they do, it's going to be the next arts district. 300% returns, easy. Sterling's tired brain flickered. Land in East Hollywood was cheap now. Dingy warehouses, laundromats, chain-link fences, but rezoning would flip it overnight. What's the buy-in? Sterling asked. Colt's eyes glinted under the porch light. $50 million. But you already owe me 23 from tonight. We'll roll it together. One wire. One move. You're back on top before summer. It was insane. It was also exactly the kind of insane Sterling had built an empire on. Send me the details, he said. No details, my friend, Colt replied. Just trust. And trust is the only currency worth more than money. They shook hands again. Sterling felt the same damp, warm grip, and the same sense of something quietly binding him. Driving home, the sun just beginning to scrape pink over the hills, Sterling told himself it was the beginning of a comeback. But in the rearview mirror, Colt Reeves was still standing in the driveway, watching him go like a man who'd already taken possession. 2 days later, Sterling was back in Benedict Canyon. But this time there were no cards, no whiskey, no laughter bleeding from a poker table. Colt Reeves had invited him to talk business, and Sterling told himself that's all it was. The mansion looked even more intimidating in daylight. Its black steel facade reflected the morning sun in hard, merciless angles. Sterling parked in the circular drive beside a Bentley SUV and a matte gray Ferrari. The front door opened before he could knock. Colt appeared in a crisp white shirt, no tie, barefoot, holding a mug of coffee like it was a cigar. Price. Come in. Let's make you richer. Inside, the space felt colder than Sterling remembered. The art was still there, but the warmth of that high-stakes night was gone. They walked through the glass-lined hall to a sprawling terrace overlooking the canyon. On a teak table sat a manila folder and a laptop, both waiting for him. Colt poured him coffee before speaking. Here's the deal. 27 parcels, mostly industrial, all within walking distance of the new metro extension. The city will approve rezoning in 2 months. We lock it up now, we triple our investment in under a year. Sterling flipped through the folder, maps, photos, a few legal descriptions. No official documents. Where's the paper trail? Colt smiled like Sterling had made a joke. This isn't something you file in triplicate, my friend. You wire the funds. My people handle acquisition through Shell LLCs. Keeps the city off our scent until it's time to sell. Sterling leaned back. Am I 23 million from the game? Rolled in. Colt said, casual as a shrug. 50 total from you. 50 from me. We split the profits. It was reckless. It was murky. But Sterling had made bigger bets on less tangible dreams. This was Los Angeles. Fortunes here didn't grow from caution. He signed a single-page agreement that was more handshake than contract. Colt stood, clapped him on the back. Welcome to the table, partner. As Sterling left, he noticed a man in a charcoal suit standing at the edge of the driveway, talking into an earpiece. Colt didn't introduce him, didn't even glance his way. Driving down the canyon, Sterling felt something he couldn't name, a sliver of unease under the thrill. Like the city itself had shifted a fraction, and he hadn't noticed until just now. The first call came from his CFO. Sterling, did you authorize a wire transfer for 50 million yesterday? Sterling was in his Bel Air office, the glass wall behind him framing Los Angeles in its hazy, gold morning. He swiveled in his chair, phone pressed to his ear. Yes, investment property in East Hollywood. It's a lock. A pause. Then, there's no paperwork, no holding company, just a personal transfer to an account in the Cayman Islands. Sterling frowned. Colt's structuring it off-market. Keeps the city from sniffing around. His CFO's voice dropped. Colt Reeves doesn't have a registered LLC in California. And one more thing. Your personal liquidity is down to 42 million. If you keep moving money like this, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. Sterling hung up before the conversation turned into a lecture. He told himself Colt was just being discreet. This was how deals in L.A. got made. Quietly, quickly, without red tape. But the second call was harder to ignore. It came from a production partner on a streaming series Sterling had co-financed. The funds didn't clear for the next shoot block. Are you still on board? Sterling promised it was a temporary glitch. The truth was, he'd diverted the funds 2 weeks ago to cover a shortfall on another project. Juggling capital was nothing new for him, but now the balls felt heavier, the air between them tighter. By the end of the week, the third crack appeared. TMZ ran a story. Billionaire media mogul's wife seen in Malibu with rising actor. The photo was grainy but unmistakable. Mia, in oversized sunglasses, holding hands with a man half Sterling's age. The internet did what it always did, laughed, speculated, and kept the story alive long enough to sting. That night, Sterling sat alone on his balcony with a bottle of Macallan 30. The city looked unchanged, but something inside him felt like it had been shifted 1 inch off its axis. Colt hadn't returned his last 2 texts. The wire confirmation to the Caymans stared back at him from his email like a signed confession. In the stillness, he heard his father's voice from decades ago. You don't lose everything all at once. You give it away in pieces. For the first time in years, Sterling wondered if he'd just handed away the biggest piece of all. It started with a locked gate. When Sterling's driver turned up Benedict Canyon Road the following Monday, the black steel entrance to Colt Reeves's mansion was shut tight. No cameras turned toward them. No discreet nod from a security guard. Just a blinking red light on the keypad and silence. Sterling pressed the intercom. Nothing. He tried Colt's cell. Straight to voicemail. He texted. No reply. By the time the driver circled back down the canyon, Sterling's stomach was a slow, cold knot. Back in Bel Air, he called a contact at the county recorder's office. Can you pull property records for a Benedict Canyon address? Belongs to Colt Reeves. The man called back 10 minutes later. That house isn't owned by anyone named Reeves. Titles in a trust registered out of Singapore. No local addresses, no tax filings in California. By evening, Sterling was in a booth at the Polo Lounge, leaning across the table toward a man who'd once handled due diligence for one of his acquisitions. I need everything on Colt Reeves, he said. The man chuckled. If that's his real name. 2 days later, the report landed in Sterling's inbox. Colt Reeves wasn't in any public database. No driver's license in California. No property ownership. No corporate filings. The only trace was a Nevada LLC dissolved 3 years ago and a handful of grainy photos from industry events. Always with different people. Always smiling like the room belonged to him. The real punch came at the end, known in certain circles for high-stakes private games. Allegedly involved in multiple offshore investment schemes. Unverified rumors suggest organized crime ties overseas. Sterling read the line twice. The Macallan in his glass suddenly felt like a bad idea. That night, he drove himself to Benedict Canyon. Parked across from the mansion. Watched. No lights, no movement, no cars in the drive. By 2 a.m., it was clear Colt Reeves was gone. The $50 million wasn't an investment. It was a disappearance fee. When Sterling got home, another message waited in his email. This one from his bank's legal department. We've received inquiries from creditors regarding your personal assets. Please contact us immediately. Somewhere between the stillness of that canyon road and the blinking cursor in his inbox, Sterling realized the truth. He wasn't chasing Colt anymore. He was chasing the last days of his empire. By Wednesday morning, Sterling's name was quietly circulating through Los Angeles in a way it never had before. Not on billboards or variety headlines, but in whispered questions over lunch tables in Beverly Hills and hushed phone calls between agents. Did you hear? Price is liquidating. He started with the downtown condo tower, 58 stories of glass and steel, his pride and joy. He'd bought the land a decade earlier, back when the neighborhood still smelled of brake dust and old liquor stores, and turned it into the kind of address that influencers lied about living in. Now he was offering it to a Dubai-based fund for 20% under market. They countered at 30% under. He sold anyway. The Bel Air mansion went next. He told himself he could always buy another once things stabilized. A private equity firm out of New York sent a pair of lawyers to tour it. They didn't compliment the view, didn't glance at the pool. They asked how soon he could vacate. By Friday, his assistant was fielding calls from people Sterling hadn't heard from in years. Old poker acquaintances, former studio partners, pretending they wanted to catch up, but inevitably circling to one question. You looking for a buyer? Even the Lakers' stake came up for sale. That was when the media noticed. TMZ ran a headline. Billionaire Sterling price dumping assets. Trouble in paradise. The comments section tore him apart. The worst blow came from inside his own circle. His CFO, the one who'd warned him about the Colt transfer, resigned via email. No phone call, no meeting, just a PDF of a signed resignation letter and a brief line. I can't be part of this. That night, Sterling stood in his now half-empty living room, the city glittering beyond the glass like it was taunting him. He'd sold 3 of his most prized holdings in less than a week. The cash was coming in, but most of it was already spoken for, creditors, settlements. Debts he hadn't thought about in years suddenly resurfacing like bodies in a drained pool. He poured another drink. In the quiet, he thought about Colt Reeves, not with anger now, but with a grim sort of admiration. The man hadn't just taken his money. He'd taken the illusion Sterling had been living under, that he was untouchable in a city built on touch. It happened on a Monday morning, the kind where Los Angeles skies looked impossibly blue, like the city was mocking anyone having a bad day. Sterling was in his office, what was left of it, when the call came from his bank. Mr. Price, I'm afraid we've frozen your personal accounts pending investigation into multiple outstanding claims. Until these matters are resolved, no withdrawals can be processed. Sterling gripped the receiver. You're freezing my money? It's not just your money anymore, sir, the voice replied. Several creditors have filed liens, and the Department of Justice has opened a preliminary inquiry into offshore transfers, one in particular to the Cayman Islands. For a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of his own breath. $50 million to Colt Reeves had become more than a bad investment. It was a smoking gun. By midday, the vultures arrived. 2 reporters from the L.A. Times camped outside his Bel Air gate, cameras ready. His phone buzzed with calls from journalists, former associates, even people he'd only met at parties, all of them suddenly fascinated by his collapse. At 3 p.m., his attorney showed up, tie loosened, face grim. Sterling, they're coming for the house. You've got 30 days before foreclosure proceedings start. If you don't want the press to see the sheriff's department walk you out, I suggest you leave before then. That night, Sterling walked through the mansion's silent halls. The art was gone, sold off in a rush. The wine cellar was nearly empty. Even the bowl of citrus in the kitchen, a detail he'd once thought ridiculous, sat half full, neglected. He stepped onto the balcony one last time. The city below didn't care that he was losing everything. The billboards still glowed. The traffic still crawled along Sunset. Somewhere out there, Mia was probably sipping wine in Malibu, not thinking of him at all. He remembered what his father had said. You don't lose everything all at once. You give it away in pieces. But tonight, it felt like all the pieces had finally been swept off the table in one motion. When he went back inside, the place felt smaller, quieter, like it was already someone else's home. Sterling Price left Bel Air at dawn, driving himself in a car that used to turn heads, but now just blended into traffic. In the trunk were 3 suitcases, everything he hadn't sold, given away, or abandoned. He didn't look back at the mansion. The bank could have it. For weeks, he drifted. First a hotel in West Hollywood, then a rented guest house in Silver Lake, the kind with creaky floors and mismatched furniture. It was the first time in decades he'd lived without staff. He learned to make his own coffee, to wash his own shirts. The quiet was foreign, but not unwelcome. The headlines faded quickly. Los Angeles had new scandals, new billionaires to worship, new falls from grace to dissect. Sterling became a ghost in the city he once owned, still recognizable to a few, but now met with curious stares instead of eager handshakes. One evening, walking down Melrose, he spotted a small cafe where the lights were warm and the music was low. Inside, a young filmmaker was pitching her first project to a producer. Sterling lingered at the counter, listening. Her passion reminded him of himself, long before the private jets, the poker tables, the handshakes that cost millions. When she left, Sterling followed her outside and introduced himself. She knew the name, but not the scandal. She only knew the man who had once made impossible projects happen. "Can I see your script?" he asked. She handed it over without hesitation. Sterling read it that night in the rented guest house. It was raw, unpolished, but there was something there, something alive. He realized, with a strange sort of relief, that he could still recognize value when he saw it. He didn't have billions anymore. He didn't have the penthouse views or the courtside seats. But he still had the thing that had built it all in the first place, the hunger. The next morning, he called her. "I can't give you much," he said, "but I can give you enough to start." For the first time in months, he felt the city shift slightly back toward him, not with applause, not with power, but with possibility. Sterling Price wasn't back, but he wasn't gone either. And in Los Angeles, sometimes that was enough.